findings of 7 eye tracking studies we did with the Happy. Some of the pictures you'll see are going to be by now familiar to you because you just saw them. They come from this Harris poll. This was published some time ago in Applied Sciences, and to do these experiments we used eye motions online, and this is a system with which you don't need specialized eye tracking glasses. You can download the software, and then your webcam is being calibrated. You look at some points on the screen, and then you try not to move your head. Then your webcam follows your eyes, and then at the end you recalibrate the screen and you get the results. So you can have the experiments done at home with volunteers. So you already know about the Harris poll and the preference of Americans by a large margin for traditional versus modern architecture for federal buildings. This is the overall result. We saw this thing already. And this was across the board, more or less the same for Republicans, Democrats, Independents, women, men, etc., etc. So the way this was done is that we put these images side by side, and so before I go to the images, just to say, these 7 studies, they were not monothematic, so it was not just one traditional versus modern and another one something else. They were a little bit mixed. The first study contained the Harris poll images, and Justin Schober was the kindness to allow us to use them all, so we run them all. And then there were also some other images, which you will see later. So the way this was done was that the eyes of the participants were tracked, and within the area of interest, what is shaded in the images at the lower level, the software calculated the time to first fixation, when did the people actually look at the building, and the dwell time, how long did they look at it. And the result was a heat map in this case, and the heat map expresses the dwell time, not the time to first fixation. You can see the time to first fixation down in the images. So in this case, we see that the heat map goes to the traditional building. In this case, the same, but if you look down on the numbers, time to first fixation goes first to the modern building. And as it turns out, this is not because there's something about the modern building that attracts the eyes faster. This is because there's a left to right bias. And there's a left to right bias even in people who do not write left to right. It's been found even in babies, even in some animals. So we mixed around the positions to see if we'll cancel out this effect. We could not present the same pairs twice, because the idea was to have them, that people would see them for the first time. So another example here, it's the same pattern. Actually, in this case, again, the modern attracts the eye first because it's on the left, but the traditional keeps the gaze for longer. So all Harris poll images were eye tracked, in addition to others. For example, these were Anne's photos. So again, you see clear preference for traditional building. This is something I did on Photoshop. This is a landscape in the city above the town of Meran in the Alps, in the Italian Alps. There's normally no building on the right, and I added, with Photoshop, either this building, which is part of the palace complex of Golestan in Tehran, Iran, on the left, or a generic office building on the right. Needless to say, the attraction was on the palace rather than the office building. Now, this these images, along with others, I had used in another paper a few years ago, which was questionnaire based. And in this case there were 2 and 2. And the questions here was which one is more interesting, more beautiful, makes more sense and feels more familiar. And it's very interesting that the Persian palace in the middle of the Alps won, and everything, even in feels more familiar than the generic office building, which you can find everywhere in the world, but still. And the second one was again another building from the same palatial complex. It was much lower, but it was the second one. So I think that's interesting. It's a sort of cross-referencing the data from eye tracking with preferences. Now, these images by Hernan, the texture was added or removed from the buildings, and the presence of texture always attracted the eye. The same here. Again, the color indicates the area of interest. This is something that I had done some time ago. I had taken the Milan Cathedral, the image on the right, and I had stepwise replaced its fine detail with an image from a curtain wall building. And we had run this in the paper with Nikos and Anne through 3M Pass. That's on the right, a few years ago. And 2 examples are shown from the left with the actual eye tracking from eye motions. And it's quite, the result is quite dramatic. Some pictures by Anne. The house on the left has this face-like appearance with the windows, but if you remove the windows it becomes much less interesting, and that shows in the eye tracking. There's this wooden kitchen utensil on the right, spoon, which Anne has put this little face there, and the very rudimentary elements of a face. Yes, it's just 2 eyes and the mouth, and that attracts attention too, because one of the elements, yes, fractal structure is very important, but there are also other elements that play a role in our attraction. One of them is the presence of face-like features, and there are other elements, and Nikos has extensively written about these things. This is an example of the images. Yeah, I will certainly try. Yeah. There's not much more to say. Artificial versus natural image. Again, the artificial wins. And what we did in the end is we put everything together in graphs. And here you have the categories in which these images were divided: style, texture, fenestration, eyes and face-like features, and artificial versus natural. And despite the positional bias, the traditional or the rich or the one that contains windows was the one to attract the gaze first, but not enough to create statistical significance using the conventional 0.05 threshold. But you can see that it's still somewhat more attractive. When you go to the dwell time, the differences are quite dramatic. You don't see a star in the last category, I think, because the pictures were very few. The artificial versus natural is suggested as an example, but modern versus traditional, rich versus poor, etc. It was a very strong effect in the dwell time. And in the end, we just put all the data together using 2 categories basically: a nature-like structure and a non-nature-like structure. And if you put all together, again, the result is very dramatic for the dwell time. Not so much for the tag to first fixation. So the points that one can make in a couple of minutes from this is, well, A, it's great to have eye tracking at home and be able to run studies like that. It's very useful for architecture and design studies. A question that people often ask is, okay, this attracts the eye. Is that necessarily a good thing? Maybe something really ugly would attract the eye. Maybe something grotesque would attract the eye. I think these examples, A, the Harris poll, B, the comparisons with the questionnaire study I had done some years ago, these comparisons tell us that there is actually a relation between eye tracking values and valence. That is actually a positive thing. And I think this is what we should take home. And yes, and something I've already mentioned, be aware of the left-right position when you do studies like that, because it plays an important role. Okay, thank you very much.